the health ministry is the greatest opportunity to reveal Christ's character. And that's what we want to talk about during this part of the class. Let me introduce this by saying, I'll give you something I often share in a sermon. When we think about hastening Christ's coming, what's one of the first texts we think about that tells us what has to happen before he comes? There you go. Matthew 24:14. So the gospel has to be preached in all the world, and then he'll come. Well, that was interesting. As I thought about that, I thought, well, pastors better get busy then, because it talks about preaching the gospel, and that's what they do. And then recently I read a quotation that you may have all seen, and that is, when Christ's character is perfectly reproduced in his people, then he will come to claim his own. I thought, well, wait. When this happens, he will come. Is there a disconnect between those two quotations? See, the gospel being proclaimed really is revealing his character. When his character is reproduced, and it is shared or spilled on people, so to speak, as we bump into them, and they see what God is like, then he'll come. And it started to make a lot of sense, because another quotation was, what the world needs today is what it needed 2,000 years ago. A revelation of Christ. And then I saw that God sent his Son to reveal who he is about in person. He could have sent information, couldn't he? He could have had this multimedia presentation in the sky that would blow the socks off of any one of our net meetings that we do for evangelism. He could have done that and gave all this information, says, now you guys know the truth. Now follow it, and it'll be over. But he didn't do that. He sent a person. And I realized, wow, if it's the same thing today as it was 2,000 years ago, then he doesn't want just information again. He wants people. So he sends us to do the very work that was critical to happen 2,000 years ago. And that is to reveal his character. Because the great controversy has been about who God is. And so God says, I want you to know what you're getting into. I want you to know about my government. And then decide, do you want that? So I realized that that was the main purpose that we as Christians, these character reflectors, Abraham, Noah, all of these were reflectors of who God was. And then Jesus came and reflected perfectly who he was. And then we have other people, there's Daniel and those, and then there's us. And what's our job? Reflect his character. The more perfectly we can reflect it, the better our job will be. And it's almost simplified my goal and my work to say, what do we do all this for? It's very simple. Reflect his character. So let's talk about how we reflect his character. So the 4 principles we're going to look at is insight, listening, powerful questions, and support. But before I cover them, I want you to realize that if I am going to reflect his character, a reflection is there is something out there that bounces off of me onto somebody else, isn't it? So if God does something and he has a characteristic and he uses that for me and he gives that to me, and then I reflect and do the same thing to somebody else, isn't that one of the most perfect ways of reflecting his character? So coaching provides an opportunity for me not just to use good skills to help a person achieve a goal, but it uses the skills that actually reflect what God does to us. And that is exciting, because I might tell somebody, we need to reflect Christ's character. and they don't really have the skills, and they don't really look at this specifically, and so they just say, well, I'll just be a nice person. But there are characteristics that he uses that we can learn as skills to reflect him. And so I want to start with insight. This is a characteristic of God because, think about it, without God, I can be scared, I can be hopeless, I can have no point in life, and then I get some insight on what is available, and all of a sudden things change. And an example of that, well, remember about Elisha? They were surrounded by the Syrians. You remember that his servant was scared to death. His servant not only felt that he was going to die, but he was going to probably be tortured to death, and so he is trembling. Elisha has different insight, doesn't he? Elisha is not scared at all. In fact, when Elisha prayed that his servant's eyes would be open, that's insight, and he saw that God's army was bigger and stronger and more powerful than all the Syrians around them, and they surrounded that army, there was new insight, wasn't there? What if you, as a coach, are able to give insight, relieve those kind of fears, give hope, and remove distress and depression and those type of things because of insight, such as Bible promises? So when we give insight, we are revealing a characteristic of God who relieves stress, relieves pressure from us when we simply know the truth. Most of the stresses that we have are because we believe a lie. I want to share just a little bit about Bible promises, which is an aspect of insight. That promises were simply statements of truth. Now, truth doesn't have to be claimed necessarily. Truth is always there. And so I put together a little story that helped me understand this. My son, I saw him through the door stealing cookies out of the cookie jar. And later, I get my two kids together and say, hey, the cookies are all gone. We were going to have those for dessert. Who ate those? And they both said, I didn't. Now, if I had not seen him, I would be fooled maybe by his lie. Is that true? He could probably fool me by his lie. But I saw him. So when he lied to me, how much power was there to his lie? Zero. I wasn't fooled at all because I saw him. Now think about how that applies to promises. A temptation is a lie that's believable. Does that make sense? A temptation is a lie that's believable. So when I'm tempted, I am really being told a lie. But it's a very tricky lie that I might believe. What if I know what the truth is? What happened to a lie when I know the truth? Lose the power. These are things we can help people with insight. Giving insight is a gift that God gives to us, and we simply pass that on to Him. Listening is probably one of the most important and most missed things that God gives to us. So today we have a world that is socially disconnected and is hungry for someone to listen to them. And we can provide that. And now God's character can be seen in a desert of listening. Jesus raised his eyes to heaven and he prayed, Father, I'm grateful that you have listened to me. You always listen to me. Now here is the Father giving a characteristic of his to his Son. So what does Jesus do in return? He listens to the disciples. He listens to the people he runs into. He listens to us. And what do we do in return? We reflect also. So we start listening. And each of those passing down this characteristic of God is reflection. It's reflected from God to Jesus to us to others. That is true reflecting. So as I sit and listen to someone and ask questions and care about what they have to say, I am reflecting one of the most important characteristics of God that maybe people haven't seen for a long time. When I listen to someone, it really shows acceptance to them. I accept you. I want to know more about you. If I'm always talking, I really am not accepting you. You just happen to be someone I can talk to instead of listen to. Or let's say I'm talking to someone across the table and I've got my cell phone out there and little messages keep coming up. Have you ever sat by someone where you're talking to them and they keep glancing over at their cell phone, especially when you hear it rattle and stuff, and they're checking those out? Don't you feel distracted? Don't you feel like that person cares more about that? And the TV's on and my kids are making a bunch of noise and stuff. I'm going to be distracted from listening. Our natural tendency to problem solve. A person starts talking and we've got a solution to the problem. Oh, what about this? We're problem solving. And that sounds like a good thing to do, but it's important for us to stop and listen and say, wait, I don't know if I heard the whole story yet. Why am I solving a problem before I've heard the whole story? And so listening gets distracted by our problem solving. Also, we're afraid of silence. We might ask a question, and then instead of listening, maybe it took them too long to answer. And so then we started talking. And there's an interesting principle here in coaching, and that is, the longer it takes a person to answer your question, the more powerful and important the question was. If I ask a question that is personal, that may be very important to them, they've got to think about it. Give it time, and don't be afraid of silence, or otherwise we will lose the most important opportunities that we have. Does that make sense? And I'm supposed to be thinking and listening to what they're saying, and my mental clutter is so much. And I believe that we need to pray for clarity of mind and say, God, you know there's lots of things on my mind right now. Can you take them away because this person's really important to me? Do you think you'll do it? I do. Let's look at the beauty of listening. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They are free to receive, to welcome, to accept. Listening is much more than allowing another to talk while waiting for a chance to respond. See, because we want to give our point. And so we listen. So we need to wait on our story. There may be a time when it's appropriate, but when we tell ours, it takes away from the need for theirs. Listening is paying full attention to others and welcoming them into our very being. Isn't it fun to go to new places and to go on new roads and to see things you've never seen before? Think about that with people. Isn't it fun to say, I get to meet some new people, to listen to their story? It's like traveling through a new place in the world and to be able to see something I've never seen before. And so we're gaining from people, learning from them, opening up our heart. Listening is a form of spiritual hospitality by which you invite strangers to become friends, to get to know their inner selves more fully. That spiritual hospitality, I like that phrase. Doesn't that resonate with you? That whole concept of accepting people in. Tell me more about that. Instead of just listen until you no longer exist. You see, it's always about us. But when we learn this listening skill pretty soon, it's like, I'm just learning about them, just listening. So here's a couple listening skills I want you to learn. Listen genuinely. For instance, tell me what you think, not just information. What ideas have you had? Tell me more about that. Why is that issue important to you? See, you're really digging in deeper. Listening attentively. Are you still there? Because I didn't get any cues. And even when we are talking in person, go on, tell me some more. Wow, that's interesting. Be aware that those things are good to start adding to your listening skill. We listen actively so that we get excited with them. Listening with curiosity, tell me more. And this is that part about what's over the next hill when I'm driving. I have that curiosity. And so as I'm listening to them, I'm learning a little bit, and I say, wow, I'd like to know more about that. You did what as you were growing up? So we're listening with curiosity, and we're kind of can't wait till we get over the next hill to see what else we can find out from them. Reflectively, you might say, I'm hearing you say this. Am I correct to believe such and such? And so we're asking to clarify what they are saying. And we might think, well, that was too bad that I misunderstood, but it was better for you to ask and be corrected than to not ask at all. And then later on they say, when we're talking, they say, man, I don't think you heard anything that I said. The fact I ask and am corrected is actually a valuable thing. This is an acronym WAIT, which means why am I talking? So when you're in this conversation, ask yourself, why am I talking right now? Is there a reason? Here's some simple rules in coaching. This is probably a good time to bring those up. And one is to not give advice. If you tell them things, it will not be half as powerful as if they discover it. Don't tell people something that they can discover on their own. And then don't fix the problem for them. When you are always fixing the problem, they will become dependent on you. If you are spending time with people and you know there's something that would really help them, and they're not coming up with it, you always ask their permission to share something with them. While we've been talking, I've been listening to what you're saying, something keeps coming to my mind that I think would really be helpful. Do you mind if I share that with you? You see what I've done? I haven't just dumped on them. And then after I share that, I might say, now, did that seem to fit your situation, or does that seem like something that might be helpful? What I did is I didn't tell them, this is absolute, you have to do this. I shared it with permission, and then asked them, does that seem like it might work? It still is their choice. It still has the power of something they've discovered, because I simply gave opportunities, they discovered it, it still was theirs.